And just like that, winter came. Okay, so I just watched, and just like that, season 2, episode 6, Snow Bomb. It was an interesting episode. It was a bit polar. I think the weirdest part of the whole story was Lily just randomly announces one day that she's going to lose her virginity. And Charlotte is trying her best to handle it. And it's so endearing to watch her try to handle it. You really feel for her. And then it doesn't happen. And then she just randomly announces it as she's walking out to go to her boyfriend's house. And she tries so hard not to be involved and she tries so hard, the poor thing. And then eventually her daughter calls her and says, he doesn't have condoms. He thought I'd have condoms. Can you get me condoms? Because he's afraid to go to the store. And I'm like, well, why can't you go to the store? I actually didn't think of that. Why didn't she go to the store? Well, either way, poor Charlotte goes running around New York because basically there is a giant blizzard happening and everything is closed. But she finds a pack of mixed condoms and she brings it to her and she gives it to her. And fortunately, the little actually hugs her before she closes the door, and then the last shot is of poor Charlotte just standing outside in the snow looking up at the window where obviously upstairs, she's gone upstairs. And it's just Charlotte's character and the performance is just always brilliant. I love Charlotte. So that was her story for the episode. Now, who's next? I guess we'll go with Lisa. Lisa, her husband isn't quite, I think, appreciating how important her work is. He seems to think his work and trying to become the compman or whatever the hell he was going for in New York is kind of more important. She has to get to a talk that she's doing about her film in this snowstorm. Everyone has to go out on this snow bomb. And she gets there and she has a little moment in the bathroom where she's sort of gone prepared and she takes her thing off and then she puts her wig on and there's a lady standing watching her get herself together and she looks at her and says, we're not going to let some snow stop us, are we? And it's a nice moment. And she goes out, she starts talking and her husband comes in because they both had things on the same day. And he was saying, well, why don't you come to my thing? She's like, well, why don't you come to my thing? Well, he went to her thing. Now, maybe he went to his thing first, I don't know, or maybe he's gone to his thing afterwards. But he was there. And it showed her, some respect, because she was just talking about how black women here know so much and what she was trying to do by focusing on 3 women who were very successful and blah, blah, blah. And it sort of showed that her husband kind of got it. So that was a nice moment for her. The other character, Nina, nothing really happened with her except she invited the girls over for dinner and she mentioned that her and her ex, because they had been together for so long, they were trying to stay friends and doing the texting. And that's when Aiden came up for the first time. Carrie said, I haven't, contacted Aiden, but I know he's divorced and sold his business and blah, blah, blah. And she's, a bit ashamed of having Googled him. Charlotte thought she would have kept in touch with Trey, but he didn't want that. Miranda's like, I wish I could get along with Steve, but we hate each other and I can't bring up anything about moving out or moving on because I have to wait for him to do it. I have to wait for him to be ready because I'm the one that hurt him. And Carrie's like, I heard him say he'd never take his wedding ring off. I think maybe you're going to have to be the one to get that conversation started. So now I guess we'll go to Miranda, which is the most tragic part of the story. So she goes home, she's at Steve's. Steve comes in, he's like, you're here. And she's like, yeah, we need to talk about this. Like, have you found a place? He's like, there are no places. And he's like, I don't want to move. This is my place. This is my home. I built this place. I worked on this place. He's like, this is my place. You didn't want to live here. You didn't want to marry me. You didn't want Braden. And I'm like, it was brutal. It was so brutal. He was so angry. And she wanted to leave, but he wouldn't let her leave. And then they go to another scene and they're lying in bed together, just like laying there. And they start talking. I thought they were going to have a real conversation about this. She says, I hate how much I hurt you and so forth. And then she notices a condom wrapper. She's like, you're having sex with someone? She's like, I thought you were the victim and, I was waiting for you. And he's like, I'm not a victim. He's like, well, good. If you're not a victim, then I can go. We're all good. And she walks out and I'm like, I don't like the way they resolved that. I mean, I can see how she sort of could just think like that, like, oh, he's fine now. He screwed someone, he's fine. I can move on without, dealing with everything. I don't like the way they ended his story like that, because I was thinking, how would they deal with that? Because he hadn't really had more than half a scene really before in the season so far. Now, who are we left to now? I think just it's funny. Anthony hangs out with Charlotte a lot. He was there when the announcement was made, but he didn't really have anything happen. He hasn't had anything happen much. He's probably the least explored character so far. The new girls have started to sort of fit in more. Like Che, they showed her at home with Miranda, and she sort of was not wanting to really engage with Miranda. Miranda's like, okay, we'll go to bed then. And then she starts doing cameo videos. She's like, it's the only way I can make money without leaving the house while, because no one knows that I failed and my show's been cancelled. And she's like, well, I can't sleep here while you're doing that, while you're performing for these people and they're getting the person I wish I had. And she's like, well, I'm not performing for them. I'm performing for them. I'm not performing for you. Like, is that what you want? So things weren't going well there. That was before she actually went home, and then she had the fight with Steve, and then so they break up, and then she goes back to Che, because Che has just been to an event. I want to finish Carrie's story off last, but Carrie asked Che to go to this widows conference that she was going to have to go to because she was afraid of talking in public and everything, and they go, they help, and they also just realise that, what they're going through, the death of her ego, as she put it, the death of their ego, as they put it, is not that important compared to, like, what they went through, and that they can get through this. And about outgrowing who you were, she feels like she's outgrown the relationship with Miranda, and Miranda walks in, she's like, I can't believe me and Steve are like this, and we should have broken up when we could have still been friends. We didn't hate each other that much. And she's like, that's exactly what I was thinking about us. I think this is not going to get any better. And Miranda's like, yeah, I understand. I don't think it's going to get any better either. And they break up. So there's another scene, identical shot of her lying in bed with her, and they're talking about ending that. She's like, 2 breakups in one day. I'm killing it. So yeah, Miranda, I don't know, she threw everything away for this romantic comedy experience and running away to LA with Che, which didn't work. And now she's just got this angry ex-husband, this dysfunctional son, and I don't know what she's going to do about the house, because apparently it's in her name, but he wants to live there, so what, does she just rent to him for the rest of her life? I don't know what they're going to do. But Carrie had a moment. She went to this event, and the lady before her, and I know the actress was in something, I really recognise her, but I don't know who it was. She's doing like a comedy routine, and this lady who organised the show, who booked Carrie, was someone that Carrie worked with in the 90s. I was supposed to write a romantic comedy together, and it didn't happen. And she actually thinks that pitch was stolen for the movie 27 Dresses. So she resents her because apparently Carrie didn't show up for the last meeting, and it fell apart because of that. And she feels like, well, I basically would have had this movie made if it weren't for you. So she's passively aggressively attacking her the whole time, and she puts her on to do a dramatic reading of her book, part of her book, after the comedian. So she's freaking out backstage. She's like, Che, please write me something. So they write her a joke. It doesn't really work. It falls flat, and then she just is like, I'm going to read from my book now. She starts reading, but it goes over really well. She talks about how, you don't move on because you're ready. You move on just because you outgrow who you were. And the grief didn't get smaller. She got bigger, and the grief felt smaller, and she moved on. And it's a nice little piece, and everyone applauded. It went over well. The comedian said thank you because I read the book. I just needed a good cry. Like, there's sort of both sides of this coin, dealing with the grief and then sort of moving on, and it's all part of it. And she's sort of covering one side, she's covering the other side. So there was a bit of respect between the authors, and she went on to sell her book, and Che went home to break up with Miranda. And then when Carrie got home, she had written a letter because I can never remember her name. Seema. She she proposed to Carrie to get a home in the Hamptons for the summer because she just couldn't stay home for another, weekend basically. And she sort of picked one, and she just got Carrie to agree. And then she noticed that Carrie had written an email because she wrote an email to Aiden basically saying, "Remember me? How are you?" sort of thing. And she didn't want to send it, like, don't accidentally send it. I thought she was going to accidentally send it, but she didn't. And at the end of the episode, she does send it. And that's how that starts. But I found it interesting, though, that at the start of the episode, she was setting up her camera to do a talk with some blogger, and the blogger had no idea who she was. And she says, "So what's your book about, girlfriend?" And she's like, "Death." And she's like, "What?" She's like, "It's about my husband dying." And she's like, "So what shade of like lipstick are you into now?" And Carrie's just like, and the computer falls off the box and breaks. I laughed so hard. And she's like, "Oh, thank God." It was brilliant. When she's talking to Seema, she's like, "And my computer committed suicide." It was so good. That was the start of the episode. There were a couple of funny parts in the episode, like some of Charlotte's exchanges were really funny, but the scene with Steve letting out all his anger at Miranda was just devastating. So it was quite a polar episode, but I loved it. And I'm really loving this series, and I love talking about this series. So I'm going to review every episode. Even if nobody watches, I don't care. I just enjoy talking about it. But yeah, I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Maybe even ding the bell. You might see the next review. But yeah, I'm just really loving the show. They're treating the characters with respect. I mean, there's a few little quibbles, but that's about it. They're like living their lives again. It's not just like first season was all about Carrie's grief. This season they're actually doing stuff, and it's just great to see these characters go on. And there's no reason why characters like this can't go on. We don't have to end a show after a certain amount of years or a certain amount of episodes. The idea that a show can come back 10 years later when the characters are in a different place and have other stories to tell, and that it's really nice. I like the way this happened with a lot of shows, and particularly this one. But I'm still talking up to 12 minutes to myself. I'm going to go. Bye.